Commander Sarah Chen hadn't expected to find anything alive in the wreckage. The research outpost on Kepler 186 had gone dark 3 weeks ago, and as she guided her scout ship through the purple-tinged atmosphere, the devastation below confirmed her worst fears. The facility lay in ruins, its reinforced walls torn open like paper, scattered across the rocky terrain like discarded toys. The mission was supposed to be simple: investigate the communication blackout, retrieve any surviving data, and report back to Central Command. But as she landed her ship near the facility's main entrance, her sensors picked up something impossible: a faint life sign, flickering like a dying star. Sarah checked her environment suit's seals one final time before stepping out onto the alien world's surface. The twin suns cast long shadows across the landscape, and the wind carried particles of crystalline dust that chimed softly against her helmet. Following the life sign reading, she made her way through the twisted corridors of the facility, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris. The signal led her to what remained of the xenobiology lab. Most of the equipment was destroyed, but in a small alcove, protected by fallen debris, she found something that made her catch her breath. A child, or at least something that looked like a child. Its skin was translucent, shifting colors like the surface of a soap bubble, and where hair should have been, delicate tendrils moved of their own accord. The creature was curled into a tight ball, trembling. "Hello." Sarah kept her voice soft, though her suit's external speakers made it sound mechanical. The child's head snapped up, revealing eyes that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. Fear was a universal language, and this being was terrified. Sarah slowly removed her helmet, trusting her sensors that the air was breathable. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. The child watched her with those impossible eyes, tendrils writhing more slowly now, almost curious. As she inched closer, Sarah noticed something else. The child was injured. A deep gash ran along one arm, seeping a luminescent fluid that pooled on the floor. Without thinking, she reached for her medkit. The moment she touched the child's skin, a jolt of energy surged through her body. Images flooded her mind. A peaceful research station, scientists of both human and alien origin working together, then chaos, screaming, and darkness. The child was projecting memories. "You're safe now," Sarah whispered, applying the universal healing gel to the wound. The child didn't resist, instead watching with fascination as the gel began to work. The luminescent blood slowly stopped flowing, and the wound began to close. Over the next few hours, Sarah pieced together what she could. The facility had been a joint venture between humans and an advanced species called the Arcturians, studying energy manipulation and cross-species genetics. The child, whom Sarah began calling Nova for the way her skin glowed like a newborn star, was part of the research, though whether as subject or offspring of one of the researchers, she couldn't tell. The attack had come without warning. Forces unknown had targeted the facility specifically, seeming to know about Nova's existence. The researchers had hidden her away, sacrificing themselves to protect something unique in the universe, a being capable of bridging the gap between different species' consciousness. As Sarah carried Nova back to her ship, she knew her simple investigation mission had become something far more complex. The child clung to her, tendrils gently wrapping around her arm, sharing feelings of trust and desperate hope. The decision to protect her wasn't really a decision at all. It was an imperative. "Central Command isn't going to believe this," Sarah muttered as she strapped Nova into the co-pilot's seat. The child looked at her with those galaxy-filled eyes and shared an image. The two of them flying among the stars, safe and together. Sarah couldn't help but smile. "You're right, little one. Maybe they don't need to know everything just yet." As the ship lifted off, Sarah glanced at her small companion. Nova had fallen asleep, her skin pulsing softly with a gentle light. Whatever forces had attacked the facility might still be out there, hunting for this remarkable child. But they would have to go through Sarah first, and she had no intention of letting anyone harm her newfound charge. The twin suns set behind them as the ship broke atmosphere, casting the ruins in deep shadow. Sarah plotted a course for the outer colonies, places where questions weren't asked and where she could buy time to figure out their next move. As she engaged the FTL drive, Nova stirred in her sleep, projecting a feeling of contentment that filled the cabin. Sarah realized that in trying to solve one mystery, she had stumbled upon something far greater. A chance to protect a being that could revolutionize human-alien relations or tear them apart if she fell into the wrong hands. But more than that, she had found someone who needed her, who trusted her completely. "Sleep well, Nova," she whispered, engaging the autopilot. "Tomorrow we start a new chapter." As the stars streaked past the view screen, Sarah began composing a very carefully worded mission report in her head. Some truths were better left for those who could handle them. And right now, Nova's safety depended on keeping certain details to themselves. The ship disappeared into the darkness between the stars, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the ruined facility held its secrets, waiting for others who would eventually come looking for answers. But by then, Sarah and Nova would be long gone, forging their own path through the cosmos. Two souls from different worlds united by circumstance and choice. 5 years had passed since Sarah Chen had found Nova in the ruins of the research facility. They'd made their home on Meridian, a frontier world far enough from Central Command to avoid unwanted attention, but developed enough to have the resources they needed. Their house sat on the edge of the settlement, overlooking vast plains of iridescent grass that reminded Nova of her own shifting skin. Sarah watched from their front porch as Nova practiced. The child, now approaching what Sarah estimated to be adolescence, hovered cross-legged above the ground, her tendrils extended outward like a corona. Around her, points of light danced and swirled, responding to her will. They'd discovered early on that Nova's ability to project memories and emotions was just the beginning of her capabilities. "Remember to maintain the boundary," Sarah called out, noting how the energy field around Nova pulsed and rippled. They'd learned the hard way that unconstrained, Nova's powers could affect electronic equipment for miles around. The last thing they needed was another incident like the one that had knocked out power to half the settlement. Nova's response came not in words, but in a gentle wave of acknowledgement that brushed against Sarah's mind. Though she'd learned to speak English fluently, Nova still preferred to communicate through her natural abilities with those she trusted. The emotional and mental connection they shared had grown deeper over the years, becoming something beyond mere words. Their life had fallen into a rhythm. During the day, Sarah worked as a shuttle pilot, running cargo between Meridian and its neighboring colonies. It wasn't the prestigious position she'd once held in the Space Force, but it kept them comfortable and, more importantly, anonymous. Nova studied independently, devouring information about both human and alien cultures with equal enthusiasm. But it wasn't all peaceful. There had been close calls, official inquiries that got too close, mysterious ships appearing in orbit only to vanish when investigated, strangers asking too many questions in the settlement. Each time, they'd prepared to run, bags packed and ship ready, but so far they'd managed to stay one step ahead. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shift in Nova's energy field. The lights around her flickered erratically, and her form tensed. Before Sarah could react, Nova dropped to the ground, her galaxy eyes wide with alarm. "They're coming," Nova projected, the message accompanied by a cascade of fragmented images, ships breaking orbit, familiar signatures that echoed the attack on the research facility years ago. Sarah was already moving. How long? Hours, maybe less. Nova's tendrils writhed with anxiety. But there's something else. She hesitated, both in thought and emotion. They're not all hostile. There are others, like me. This was new. In all their years together, they'd never encountered another being quite like Nova. Sarah had assumed she was unique, perhaps the result of the facility's genetic research. The implications made her head spin. "Show me," Sarah said, holding out her hand. Nova took it, and immediately Sarah's mind was filled with impressions, beams of light and energy, some with forms similar to Nova's, others wildly different. They were searching, calling, drawn to Nova's growing powers like moths to a flame. "They've been watching," Nova continued, her mental voice tinged with wonder and fear, "waiting until I was strong enough to sense them. The ones who attacked the facility. They're a faction that believes beings like me shouldn't exist. But the others, they want to protect me, to teach me." Sarah felt her heart constrict. She'd always known this day might come, the day when Nova would have to choose between staying in hiding and embracing her true nature. She just hadn't expected it to arrive so soon. "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. She could feel it in the complex swirl of emotions flowing through their connection. Nova's form shimmed with determination. "I want to understand who I am, what I can become. But I won't leave you." The conviction in her mental voice was absolute. "You're my family. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Sarah smiled, blinking back tears. "Then we better get ready. If there's going to be a fight, I want to be on the winning side." They spent the next hours preparing. Sarah checked her old military-grade weapons, hidden away for just such an emergency, while Nova practiced extending her energy field to create defensive barriers. As they worked, Nova shared more of what she was sensing: the approaching ships, the competing factions, the building tension in space above them. "There's something else you should know," Nova projected as they finished loading the last of their emergency supplies into their ship. "The research at the facility. It wasn't just about studying beings like me. They were trying to understand how we could help different species connect, to bridge the gaps between all intelligent life. That's why those who fear us want us destroyed. They believe some boundaries shouldn't be crossed." Sarah checked her weapon's charge one final time. "Well, they clearly haven't spent much time around humans. Crossing boundaries is practically our species' motto." Nova's skin rippled with amusement, but her expression remained serious. "The next few days will change everything. Are you sure you want to stay involved? This isn't your fight." "You made it my fight the moment I found you," Sarah replied firmly. "Besides, humanity's going to be involved one way or another. Better to have someone on the inside who can help guide things in the right direction." As if in response to her words, their perimeter sensors began to chime. Multiple ships were entering the atmosphere, converging on their location. Nova's tendrils extended outward, reading the approaching energies. "It's time," she projected, her mental voice steady, despite the swirling emotions beneath it. Sarah nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Then let's go make some history." Above them, the sky began to fill with lights, like new stars being born in broad daylight. The next chapter of their story was about to begin, and this time they weren't running away. Whatever came next would reshape not just their lives, but the relationship between humans and the cosmos itself. The ships descended like falling stars, their hulls gleaming with patterns of light that mirrored Nova's own luminescent skin. Sarah stood at the ready, her weapon charged but lowered, as Nova projected a protective energy field around them both. The air crackled with potential, both from Nova's powers and the tension of the moment. First to land was a vessel of clearly human design, a central command cruiser that Sarah recognized all too well. The second ship was something else entirely. Its surface seemed to flow like liquid mercury, and it pulsed with the same kind of energy that Nova emanated. Between them, 3 smaller craft touched down, their origins unclear but their intentions evident in their defensive positioning. From the central command ship emerged a familiar face, Admiral Helena Wright, Sarah's former commanding officer. She looked older than Sarah remembered, but her stance was as commanding as ever. From the Mercury ship came a being that made Sarah's breath catch, like Nova, but adult, its form more defined and its energy signature vastly more powerful. "Hello, little one," the being projected, its thoughts reaching not just Nova but Sarah as well. "I am Oryx, and we have been searching for you for a very long time." Nova's response was cautious but curious. You're like me. But how? Why didn't you come sooner? Because we needed you to grow strong enough to survive what comes next, Oryx answered. And we needed to be sure you had found the right guardian. At this, they inclined their head toward Sarah. Admiral Wright stepped forward. Commander Chen, you've been harboring a being of immense strategic importance. Under normal circumstances, you'd be facing court-martial. But these aren't normal circumstances, Sarah replied evenly, her hand still near her weapon. No, Wright agreed. They're not, because you've done exactly what we hoped you would. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. You knew, all this time. We suspected, Wright corrected. The attack on the research facility wasn't entirely unexpected. We knew there were forces that would stop at nothing to prevent the emergence of beings like Nova. What we didn't know was whether any had survived. When your report came in, carefully worded as it was, we had hope. Nova's tendrils writhed with agitation. You used us as bait. We protected you, Oryx projected firmly. By letting you stay hidden with Sarah, we kept you safe from those who would destroy you while allowing you to grow into your powers naturally. The human capacity for adaptation, for acceptance of the unknown, it was exactly what you needed. The smaller ships had remained sealed, but Sarah could sense movement within them. And the others? Representatives from various species, Wright explained, all with a vested interest in what happens next. Nova isn't just a unique life form. She's proof that true symbiosis between different species is possible. Her ability to bridge consciousness, to share thoughts and memories across species barriers, could revolutionize interstellar relations, or tear them apart, came a new voice. From the shadow of the central command ship stepped a figure Sarah recognized from intelligence briefings. Ambassador Chen Xi of the Isolation Movement, a growing political force that advocated for strict segregation between species. Imagine the chaos, Chen Xi continued, if every thought, every memory could be shared across species lines. The pollution of pure cultures, the loss of privacy, the potential for manipulation and control. Some boundaries exist for a reason, and some boundaries are meant to be crossed, Sarah countered, stepping closer to Nova. Every major advancement in human history came from reaching beyond what we thought possible. Oryx's form brightened. This is why we chose humanity as partners. Your species understands that growth requires risk, that isolation leads to stagnation. Nova suddenly stiffened, her energy field flaring. They're here, she projected, just as new signals appeared on their sensors. Ships were dropping out of FTL at the edge of the system. Ships that matched the energy signatures from the attack on the research facility. The preservers, Oryx explained, their form shifting with concern. They believe that beings like Nova and myself are an abomination, that conscious evolution should remain purely physical, never crossing the boundaries between mind and energy, between separate species. Admiral Wright was already barking orders into her comm unit. This is what we've been preparing for. Commander Chen, you have a choice to make. Official channels or not, we could use you in what's coming. Sarah looked at Nova, seeing not the scared child she'd found in the ruins, but a being coming into her own power, ready to face her destiny. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a lifetime of shared memories flowed between them. I didn't spend 5 years protecting her to step away now, Sarah said firmly. But we do this our way. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Nova isn't a weapon or a political tool. She's the future, and she gets to choose what that future looks like. Nova's form seemed to grow taller, her energy field expanding to encompass them all. When she projected her thoughts, they carried the weight of certainty. I choose to stand between, not for humans alone, or for beings like myself, but for the possibility that we are all more together than we could ever be apart. The incoming ships were getting closer. Around them, the representatives from various species emerged from their vessels, each carrying technologies and capabilities that could be crucial in the coming conflict. Sarah checked her weapon one final time. a small smile playing at her lips. "Well then," she said, "let's show the universe what happens when you try to tell humanity and its allies what's possible and what isn't." Above them, the sky began to darken with the approach of the Preserver fleet. But on the ground, light gathered and grew as Nova, Oryx, and their allies prepared to defend not just their own existence, but the very idea that different species could grow and evolve together. The true test of their bond, and of humanity's place in the cosmic community, was about to begin. The battle for Meridian skies began not with weapons, but with light. Nova and Oryx joined their powers, creating a shield of pure energy that rippled across the atmosphere like an aurora. The Preserver ships, dozens of them now, hung in low orbit like dark stars, their weapons charged and waiting. "They're trying to communicate," Nova projected, her form trembling with the effort of maintaining the shield. Through their connection, Sarah felt echoes of the message, a demand for surrender, a promise of quick destruction rather than prolonged suffering. Admiral Wright's voice crackled over the general comm channel. "All ships, defensive positions. Remember, we're not just protecting Nova. We're defending the right of all species to choose their own path of evolution." Sarah had taken command of a squad of hybrid fighters, human pilots paired with alien tech, each craft enhanced by the same energy that Nova and her kind wielded. As they rose through the atmosphere, she felt Nova's consciousness brush against hers, sharing tactical information faster than any conventional system could process. The first shots came from the Preservers, beams of concentrated dark energy designed to disrupt the very forces that gave Nova her powers. The shield held, but Sarah felt Nova's pain through their link. This wasn't just an attack on their defenses, it was an assault on the fundamental nature of beings like her. "They're wrong about us," Nova projected to everyone connected to the network she and Oryx had created. "They think we're an aberration, but we're the natural next step. All conscious life yearns to connect, to understand, to grow beyond its original limitations." Sarah's squadron engaged the first wave of Preserver fighters. The enemy ships were technological marvels, but they fought alone, each pilot isolated in their conviction that separation was strength. In contrast, Sarah's hybrid squadron moved as one, their movements coordinated through Nova's network, human intuition enhanced by alien technology and shared consciousness. On the ground, Ambassador Chen Tsai watched with growing unease as more ships arrived, not Preservers, but representatives from dozens of species who had been watching, waiting to see which way the tide would turn. "This will change everything," he muttered. "There will be no going back." "There never is," Admiral Wright replied. "That's called progress." The battle intensified. The Preservers, realizing they couldn't break through the shield with direct attacks, changed tactics. Their ships began to emit a frequency that made Nova cry out in pain, a signal designed to disrupt the very frequency of consciousness itself. "They're trying to sever the connections," Oryx projected, their form flickering under the assault. "Not just between us, but between all conscious beings. They believe if they can force us back into isolation, we'll forget we ever learned to reach across the void between minds." Sarah felt it too, a pressure in her mind, trying to push away the warmth of Nova's presence, the unity of her squadron, the sense of connection that had become as natural as breathing. Around her, other pilots began to falter as the signal strengthened. Then Nova did something unexpected. Instead of fighting the signal, she opened herself to it completely. Through their link, Sarah felt her intention, not to resist, but to transform. "Everyone," Nova projected, her mental voice strained but determined, "lend me your strength, not just energy, but your experiences, your memories, your understanding of what it means to be connected." Sarah didn't hesitate. She poured everything into their link. Memories of finding Nova, years of watching her grow, the joy and fear and love that had defined their journey together. Across the battlefield, others did the same. Human pilots shared their exhilaration of flight. Alien allies contributed memories spanning centuries, and through it all, Nova and Oryx wove the threads of consciousness into something new. The preserver signal began to change, transformed by the very connections it sought to sever. Where it had brought pain, it now carried understanding. Where it had forced isolation, it now offered choice. High above, the preserver ships began to falter as their own crews experienced what they had fought so hard against. The simple, overwhelming truth that consciousness naturally evolves toward connection, not away from it. They're receiving the signal, Nova projected, her form blazing like a newborn sun. Not just receiving, accepting it, understanding it. Through the network, Sarah felt the moment the first preserver ship stood down, followed by another and another. Not surrendering, but choosing to listen, to understand, to consider that perhaps their fear of connection had been fear of their own potential. But victory came with a price. The effort of transforming the signal had taken its toll on Nova. Her form flickered dangerously, the energy that composed her physical self beginning to dissipate. Nova. Sarah's fighter broke formation, diving toward the ground where Nova's light was fading. Through their link, she felt not pain or fear, but a deep sense of satisfaction. It's okay, Nova projected, her thoughts growing fainter. This isn't an ending. It's a transformation. What we've started here, the connections we've made, they'll continue to grow. That's what evolution is. Oryx moved to Nova's side, their own energy merging with hers. She's right. She's not dying. She's becoming something more, something that can exist in the space between all conscious minds, helping us grow together. As Sarah landed and ran to them, she saw that Nova's physical form was indeed changing, becoming less solid, more like pure light. But their connection remained, and through it, she understood. This was not a goodbye, but a beginning. Nova would continue to exist, not as a single being, but as a bridge between all those who chose to reach across the boundaries that separated them. The sky above Meridian cleared as ships from all sides powered down their weapons. The battle was over, but the real work, the work of learning to grow together, was just beginning. 5 years after the Battle of Meridian, Sarah Chen stood before the newly completed Convergence Center, its crystalline spires reaching toward the stars. The building was a monument to what had begun on that fateful day, not just a peace between species, but a new understanding of what consciousness could become. Nova was everywhere and nowhere. Her physical form had transformed into something beyond traditional matter, but Sarah still felt her presence. In the networks that connected distant worlds, in the moments of understanding between different species, in the dreams of children born into this new age of cooperation. "They're ready for you, Commander," a young aide said, their translucent skin marking them as one of the new generation of human energy being hybrids. Sarah smiled at the title. She'd been reinstated in the Space Force with full honors, though her role now was more diplomat than soldier. Inside the main chamber, representatives from 100 worlds gathered. Some appeared in physical form, others as holograms, and still others as pure energy signatures that danced through the air. Among them, she recognized Oryx, their form now a bridge between the physical and energy states, much like Nova had become. 10 years ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying to all through both traditional means and the telepathic network that Nova's sacrifice had made possible. "I found a child in the ruins of a research facility. I thought I was saving her, but in truth, she was saving all of us. From our fears, from our isolation, from the boundaries we had placed on our own evolution." Through the network, she felt waves of agreement, memories of that day shared and experienced by all present. The preservers, once dedicated to keeping species separate, had become students of connection, their deep understanding of isolation helping others navigate the challenges of joining minds while maintaining individual identity. "The question was never whether different species could connect," she continued, "but whether we were brave enough to try. Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt, to reach beyond what we thought possible, to see potential allies where others saw only aliens." Ambassador Chen Xi, who had opposed them that day on Meridian, now stood as one of their strongest advocates. "We feared losing our identity," he added, his thoughts joining Sarah's in the network. "Instead, we found that understanding others only strengthened our understanding of ourselves." In the years since Nova's transformation, the changes had been profound. The energy beings like her had become facilitators of a new kind of civilization, one where physical and conscious evolution proceeded hand in hand. Humans, with their adaptability and curiosity, had emerged as natural leaders in this new paradigm. Through the network, Sarah felt Nova's presence strengthen, drawn by the gathering and the memories being shared. She was different now, less an individual consciousness and more a fundamental force of connection. But her essence remained the same, a bridge between worlds, a proof that love and understanding could transcend any boundary. "Today," Sarah said, "we open the first of many convergence centers, places where any species can come to learn, to connect, to grow beyond their original limitations. But more importantly, we open our minds to a future where the line between us and them becomes meaningless." The chamber filled with light as energy beings manifested more fully, their presence a reminder of what consciousness could become. Among them, Sarah felt Nova's distinct signature, carrying echoes of the child she had once been, and the force for change she had become. "The universe is vast," she concluded, "but it's not empty. It's filled with possibilities, with potential connections, with chances to become more than we are. Our task now is not to fear these possibilities, but to embrace them, to continue reaching across the void between stars and souls alike."